The flames licked at Deanna Holloway's heels as she fled into the cold Wyoming night, her nightgown singed and her lungs burning with every desperate breath. Behind her, the farmhouse she had called home for 3 miserable years blazed against the starlit sky, illuminating the barren landscape in a hellish orange glow. Her husband Thomas's drunken shouts had faded, replaced by the roar of the inferno he had deliberately set after she had finally stood up to him, telling him she was leaving come morning. Deanna stumbled through the darkness, her bare feet bloodied from sharp rocks and prickly brush. The year was 1878, and a woman alone in the Wyoming territory had few options and even fewer allies. At 23, she had already endured more than most women twice her age. The arranged marriage to Thomas had been her father's doing a business arrangement to settle debts that had sentenced her to years of bruises hidden beneath high-collared dresses and excuses murmured to concerned neighbors. The late October air bit through her thin nightclothes as she crested a small rise, pausing only long enough to look back at what had once been her prison. The barn was catching now too, flames jumping from the house to the dry timber of the outbuilding. Thomas had been in the house when she fled, passed out drunk in his chair. Had he awakened in time? The thought should have filled her with dread, but all Deanna felt was a hollow emptiness where fear had lived for too long. She pushed on, guided only by moonlight and the distant promise of Sweetwater Creek. If she could reach it by dawn, she could follow it to the small settlement of Hollow Ridge. Someone there might help her, or at least not send her back to a husband who had just tried to burn her alive. The night stretched on endlessly. Deanna's legs grew heavier with each step, her body weakening from cold and exhaustion. When she finally collapsed at the base of a scraggly pine, dawn was just beginning to color the eastern sky. Sleep claimed her almost instantly, a merciful darkness deeper than fear. The sound of approaching hoofbeats jerked Deanna awake. The sun was higher now, warming her chilled body. She scrambled to her feet, ready to run again, but her legs buckled beneath her. The rider approached slowly, his silhouette backlit by the morning sun. "Madam, you all right?" The voice was deep but gentle, nothing like Thomas's alcohol-slurred growl. Deanna raised a hand to shield her eyes from the sun. "Please," she managed, her voice raw from smoke and fear. "Please don't take me back." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping his distance as if approaching a wounded animal. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "Take you back where, madam?" "To my husband," Deanna whispered, the words catching in her throat. The man took a step closer, and Deanna could see him more clearly now. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 28 or 30, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, but it didn't hide the concerned frown that formed at her words. "Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go," he said firmly. "Name's Zachariah Flint. Most folks call me Zach. I've got a ranch about 3 miles east of here." Deanna tried to stand again, swaying dangerously. "Deanna," she offered before darkness edged her vision. "Deanna Holloway." Zach moved with surprising speed, catching her before she hit the ground. "Easy now, Mrs. Holloway. Let's get you somewhere safe." The next thing Deanna knew, she was being carried to his horse, her body too weak to protest. As Zach lifted her onto his saddle, she caught sight of her former home in the distance, nothing more than a smoldering ruin on the horizon. "My husband," she murmured. "He set fire to our house." "With me inside." Zach's arms tightened around her as he swung up behind her in the saddle. "Then he's no husband worth returning to," he said, his voice a low rumble against her back. "Let's get you to my place. My housekeeper can tend to you." The rhythmic motion of the horse lulled Deanna into a state between wakefulness and sleep. She was vaguely aware of passing through a wooden gate, of a modest but well-maintained ranch house coming into view, of being carried up wooden steps and gentle hands helping her onto a soft bed. A woman's voice, warm with a Spanish accent, floated above her. "Dios mío, what happened to this poor child? Found her by Sweetwater Creek," Zach's voice answered. "Says her husband tried to burn her alive." "That devil," the woman exclaimed. "Señor Zach, you go now, I will take care of her." Deanna drifted in and out of consciousness as the housekeeper Rosa. She heard Zach call her, bathed her feet, applied soothing ointment to her burns, and helped her into a clean nightgown. When Rosa tried to brush her tangled hair, Deanna finally found her voice. "Thomas, my husband, is he?" She couldn't finish the question. Rosa's hands stilled in her hair. "We do not know, Nina, but you are safe here. Senor Zach is a good man. Rest now." Deanna slept deeply for the first time in years, free from the fear of a heavy hand or whiskey-soured breath. When she awoke, the room was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, panic rising in her throat until a soft knock at the door brought her back to reality. "Mrs. Holloway," Zach's voice came through the wood. "Rosa's made some supper if you're feeling up to eating." Deanna sat up, wincing at the pain in her feet. "Yes, thank you. I'll be right out." She found a simple calico dress laid out for her, one of Rosa's, she assumed, though it hung a bit loose on her frame. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found herself in a modest but comfortable home. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a sturdy table at one end and a stone fireplace at the other. Zach stood as she entered, pulling out a chair for her. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Holloway?" "Deanna, please," she said, lowering herself carefully into the chair. "And I'm much better, thank you. I don't know how to repay your kindness." Rosa placed a steaming bowl of stew before her. "Eat first, talk of repayment later." Deanna hadn't realized how hungry she was until the aroma of the stew reached her. She ate slowly at first, then with increasing urgency as her body demanded nourishment. Zach watched her for a moment before speaking. "I rode out to your place this morning." Deanna's spoon clattered against the bowl. "Did you find?" "There was a body," he said gently. "I notified Sheriff Mills in Hollow Ridge. He'll want to speak with you when you're stronger." The news should have brought relief or perhaps guilt, but Deanna felt only a profound numbness. Thomas was dead. She was free. Yet the cost of that freedom was high. She was alone in the world, without a home or means to support herself. "What will happen to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zach leaned forward, his gray eyes meeting hers. "That depends on what you want, Deanna. But you're welcome to stay here until you decide. I've got plenty of room and Rosa's been wanting company." "It's true," Rosa chimed in. "This one works too hard, has no time for conversation. You would be doing me a favor staying a while." Deanna looked between them, overwhelmed by their generosity. "I can work," she offered. "I'm good with a needle and I can cook and clean." "We'll figure all that out tomorrow," Zach said, rising from the table. "For now, just rest and heal." Over the next few days, Deanna gradually regained her strength. Her feet began to heal, allowing her to move around the house and even venture onto the porch. From there, she could see the full extent of Zach's ranch, modest compared to some in the territory, but well-maintained, with a sturdy barn, a corral for the horses, and a small herd of cattle grazing in the distance. Zach himself remained something of a mystery. He was gone from sunup to sundown most days, returning tired but always taking time to inquire after her health. From Rosa, Deanna learned that he had come to Wyoming 5 years earlier, buying the struggling ranch with savings from his time as an Army scout. He had no family to speak of, and while respected in Hollow Ridge, he kept largely to himself. On her 4th day at the ranch, Sheriff Mills arrived to take her statement. He was a gruff man with kind eyes, who removed his hat respectfully as Rosa showed him in. "Mrs. Holloway," he greeted her, settling his bulky frame into a chair across from her. "I'm mighty sorry about what happened. Can you tell me in your own words?" Deanna took a deep breath. "Thomas had been drinking heavily that night. It was nothing unusual, he drank most nights. But this time I told him I was leaving in the morning. I'd saved a little money from selling eggs and butter. Not much, but enough for a stagecoach ticket to Cheyenne." The sheriff nodded, encouraging her to continue. He flew into a rage like I'd never seen. "Started smashing things, threatening me. I locked myself in our bedroom, but he broke down the door. That's when he said." She paused, the memory vivid and terrible. "He said if I was so eager to leave, I could leave in a pine box, then he knocked me unconscious." Sheriff Mills's jaw tightened. "And the fire?" I woke to smoke. The curtains were ablaze and the fire was spreading fast. Thomas was nowhere to be seen. I climbed out the window and ran. I didn't look back until I was well away from the house. By then, it was fully engulfed. "We found Thomas in what was left of the parlor," the sheriff said solemnly. "Empty whiskey bottle nearby. Doc thinks he passed out and was overcome by the smoke." Deanna nodded, unsurprised. It was just like Thomas to fall victim to his own vicious plan. "Will I be charged with anything?" she asked quietly. Sheriff Mills looked startled. "Charged? Good heavens, no. From your account and the evidence at the scene, it's clear your husband set that fire intending to harm you. It's a tragedy he perished, but you bear no blame." He paused, adjusting his hat in his hands. "There is the matter of your husband's property. As his widow, it all passes to you." Deanna gave a bitter laugh. "There's nothing left to pass, Sheriff. The house and barn are gone. The land was mortgaged to the bank in Cheyenne. Thomas gambled away our savings months ago." The sheriff nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry to hear that. If there's anything the town can do to help." "Zach and Rosa have been very kind," Deanna said. "I'll be fine until I decide what to do next." After the sheriff left, Deanna found herself on the porch, watching the sunset paint the rolling hills in shades of gold and purple. She was free, but freedom felt terrifying in its vastness. What did a woman with no family, no money, and a dead husband do in the Wyoming territory? The sound of hoofbeats announced Zach's return. He dismounted smoothly, leading his horse to the water trough before approaching the porch. He'd shaved that morning, revealing a strong jawline and a small scar near the corner of his mouth that twitched upward when he spoke. "Sheriff Mills find you all right?" he asked, removing his hat as he climbed the steps. Deanna nodded. "He was very understanding, said I won't face any charges." "Course not. Man tries to burn his wife alive, he's the only criminal in that scenario." Zach settled into the chair beside hers. "You given any thought to what comes next?" "Every waking moment," Deanna admitted. "I have few options. I could try to find work in Hollow Ridge, perhaps as a seamstress or a teacher's assistant, or make my way to Cheyenne where there might be more opportunities for a woman alone." Zach was quiet for a long moment. "There's another option," he said finally. "I could use help around here. The ranch is growing, and Rosa can't manage the house and help with the livestock. It would be honest work with room and board until you decide on something more permanent." Deanna studied him, searching for any hint of ulterior motive, but found only sincerity in his storm-gray eyes. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" "You're not exactly a stranger anymore," Zach pointed out, "and I believe in helping folks who need it. Lord knows I've needed help myself more than once." The offer was tempting more than tempting. The ranch already felt safer than anywhere she'd lived in years. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not imposing if I'm asking," Zach said simply. "Think on it, no rush to decide." But Deanna had already decided. "Thank you. I accept your offer, at least until I get back on my feet." The smile that broke across Zach's face transformed him, softening the weathered lines around his eyes. "That's good news. Rosa will be pleased. She's taken quite a shine to you." As if summoned by her name, Rosa appeared at the door. "Dinner is ready. Both of you, come eat before it gets cold." The next weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Deanna's feet healed completely, allowing her to take on more responsibilities around the ranch. She helped Rosa with the cooking and cleaning, mended shirts and socks in the evenings, and even learned to collect eggs from the temperamental hens in the coop behind the house. Zach was true to his word. He treated her with respect and gave her space, never pressing for details about her marriage that she wasn't ready to share. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. It was during one of these quiet evenings, nearly a month after her arrival, that Deanna finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why aren't you married, Zach? A man with a successful ranch, respected in town, surely there have been interested women." Zach chuckled, the sound warm in the cooling evening air. "There have been a few, I suppose, none that seemed right." He paused, looking out over his land. "Truth is, I was engaged once, back in Missouri before the war. Caroline was her name. She died of typhoid fever while I was fighting for the Union. After that, I never much saw the point in trying again." "I'm sorry," Deanna said softly, understanding the loss in his voice. "It was a long time ago," Zach replied. "What about you? How did you end up with Thomas?" Deanna sighed, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. My father arranged it. Thomas came from back east with money to invest in Wyoming land. Father was struggling to keep our farm after my mother died. Thomas offered to pay his debts in exchange for my hand. She gave a sad smile. I was 18 and naive enough to think it might work out all right. When did you know it wouldn't? Zach asked gently. On our wedding night, Deanna answered, the memory still sharp enough to make her wince. Thomas had hidden his drinking well during courtship, but once I was his wife, he saw no need for the pretense. He was cruel when drunk, which was most of the time. Zach's hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles whitening. No man has the right to treat a woman that way. That's a rare opinion in my experience, Deanna said. Most people seem to think it was a wife's lot to endure whatever her husband dished out. Those people are wrong, Zach said firmly. Marriage should be a partnership built on respect and care. Deanna looked at him with new appreciation. You're an unusual man, Zachariah Flint. His eyes crinkled at the corners. So Rosa tells me at least once a day. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of riders approaching. Zach stood, instantly alert. We're not expecting anyone. Stay here. He descended the porch steps, hand resting near the revolver at his hip. 3 riders emerged from the growing darkness, slowing as they approached the house. Deanna tensed, heart racing with sudden fear. Evening, Flint, called the lead rider, a wiry man with a drooping mustache. Hope we're not disturbing your dinner. Depends on what you've come for, Jenkins, Zach replied, his tone neutral but wary. The man called Jenkins dismounted, followed by his companions. Just passing on a message from Mr. Garrett. He's raised his offer for your water rights, $1,500 now. Zach shook his head. My answer's the same as it was last month and the month before that. The creek stays with my land, not for sale at any price. Jenkins sighed dramatically. Mr. Garrett won't be pleased. He's not a man who likes hearing no. That's between him and his temperament, Zach said evenly. Now, if that's all your business, my supper's getting cold. The men remounted, but Jenkins lingered a moment longer, his gaze shifting to Deanna on the porch. Evening, madam. Don't believe we've met. You Flint's new housekeeper. Before Deanna could answer, Zach stepped into Jenkins's line of sight. My household arrangements aren't your concern, Jenkins. Ride on now. Something in his tone made Jenkins rethink whatever he'd been about to say. With a tip of his hat that held more mockery than respect, he turned his horse and led his men away. When they were out of earshot, Deanna joined Zach in the yard. Who were they? Hands from the Triple G Ranch, Zach explained, his expression grim. Stuart Garrett owns most of the land east of here. He's been trying to buy water rights from every small rancher in the county. Those who refuse tend to have accidents. Deanna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Has he threatened you? Not directly. He's too clever for that. Zach guided her back toward the house. Don't worry about Garrett. He's been trying to run me off for 2 years without success. But Deanna did worry, especially when she saw how troubled Rosa looked at the mention of Garrett's name. That night, she lay awake long after the house had gone quiet, listening to unfamiliar creaks and rustles, imagining faceless men surrounding the ranch. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Deanna was helping Rosa prepare breakfast when Zach entered, already dressed for a day's work. I'm heading to town for supplies, he announced. Anything either of you need? Rosa rattled off a list of household necessities while Deanna hesitated. Could I come with you? I haven't been to town since arriving, and I should probably let people see I'm alive and well before rumors start. Zach considered this. Probably wise. People talk, and your situation is bound to raise questions. Be ready in 20 minutes. The ride to Hollow Ridge took just under an hour. Deanna found herself enjoying the crisp morning air and the gentle rhythm of the horse beneath her. Zach had given her a spare mount, a docile mare named Buttercup, and seemed impressed by her riding skills. Thomas may have been a brute, she explained when he commented, but he did need help with the horses. It was the one chore I actually enjoyed. Hollow Ridge was smaller than Deanna had imagined, just a single street of weathered buildings serving the surrounding ranches and homesteads. A general store, a saloon, a small church, the sheriff's office, and a few other businesses made up the entirety of the town. As they rode in, Deanna was keenly aware of curious eyes following them. She straightened her spine, determined not to appear as nervous as she felt. Zach led them to the general store, tethering their horses at the hitching post outside. "Mrs. Evans runs this place," he told Deanna as they entered. "She's a good woman but loves a bit of gossip. Let me do the introductions." The store was neat and well-stocked, with everything from flour and sugar to tools and fabric. Behind the counter stood a plump, pleasant-faced woman who brightened at the sight of Zach. "Zachariah Flint, twice in 1 month. To what do I owe this pleasure?" "Just the usual supplies, Mrs. Evans," Zach replied with an easy smile, "and I've brought a guest. This is Mrs. Deanna Holloway. She's staying at my ranch for a while." Mrs. Evans's eyebrows shot up as she took in Deanna's appearance. "Mrs. Holloway, we heard about the terrible fire. Such a tragedy. How are you faring, my dear?" "I'm recovering well, thank you," Deanna said politely. "Mr. Flint and his housekeeper have been very kind." "I'm sure they have," Mrs. Evans replied, her tone implying more than her words. "It's fortunate you found such accommodating neighbors in your time of need." Deanna felt her cheeks warm, suddenly understanding how her presence at Zach's ranch might be perceived. "Mr. Flint has been a perfect gentleman," she said firmly. "I'm working as his assistant housekeeper until I decide on my next steps." Mrs. Evans looked suitably chastened. Of course, no one would suggest otherwise. Now, what can I get for you today?" While Zach went through his list of supplies, Deanna browsed the store, eventually selecting some yarn and knitting needles. Her small savings were meager, but she was determined to contribute something to the household that had taken her in. As they left the store, supplies loaded into Zach's saddlebags. A commotion further down the street caught their attention. A group of men had gathered outside the saloon, their voices raised in anger. "Stay here," Zach instructed, but Deanna followed a few steps behind him anyway, curiosity overriding caution. At the center of the group stood Sheriff Mills and a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. Even without an introduction, Deanna knew this must be Stuart Garrett. He carried himself with the arrogance of someone used to getting his way. "The water rights are legally mine, Sheriff," Garrett was saying. "Peterson signed them over fair and square." "After his barn mysteriously burned down and half his cattle were found dead," the sheriff replied dryly. "Hardly seems fair and square to me." Garrett's face hardened. "Are you accusing me of something, Mills? Because that's a dangerous road for a man in your position." "Just stating facts as they appear," the sheriff said, standing his ground. "Peterson was against selling until those unfortunate events." "The West is full of unfortunate events," Garrett replied smoothly. "Men who adapt survive, those who don't." He shrugged eloquently. It was then that Garrett noticed Zach watching. His eyes narrowed, then shifted to Deanna standing a few paces behind. Something in his expression changed a calculating interest that made Deanna instinctively step back. "Flint," Garrett acknowledged with a nod. "I hear you've been entertaining my offer." "You heard wrong," Zach replied. "Jenkins delivered your message. My answer remains no." Garrett sighed theatrically. "Such stubbornness, it'll be the ruin of you small ranchers." His gaze returned to Deanna. "And who might this lovely lady be?" "Not your usual type, Flint." Before Zach could answer, Deanna stepped forward. "Deanna Holloway, Mr. Garrett. I'm working for Mr. Flint temporarily." "Holloway," Garrett's eyebrows rose. "Thomas Holloway's widow, my condolences on your loss." The false sympathy in his tone made Deanna's skin crawl. "Thank you," she replied stiffly. "If you're looking for more permanent employment, Mrs. Holloway, the Triple G could always use a woman of refinement. The housekeeper's quarters are quite comfortable." "That's very kind," Deanna said, not meaning it at all, "but I'm quite happy with my current arrangement." Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The offer stands. Good day to you both." With a tip of his hat, he turned and entered the saloon, his men following in his wake. Sheriff Mills approached them once Garrett was out of earshot. "I'd watch your back, Zach. Garrett's getting impatient with the holdouts." "I noticed," Zach replied grimly. "How many others are left besides me? Just old man Wilkins and the Peterson place, now that his son's taken over." "Everyone else has sold or been run off." The sheriff glanced at Deanna. "Mrs. Holloway, good to see you in town. You're looking well." "Thank you, Sheriff. I'm feeling much improved." They bid the sheriff goodbye and finished their business in town quickly. The ride back to the ranch was quieter, both lost in their thoughts. "Garrett seems dangerous," Deanna finally said as the ranch came into view. Zach nodded. "He is. Men like him think everything has a price. Land, water people can't stand being told no. Why is he so set on your water rights?" "My creek feeds into the river that borders his property. If he controls all the water sources, he controls every rancher in the county." Zach's jaw tightened. "My father taught me that water is life out here. You don't sell your lifeline, no matter the price." Deanna studied his profile, admiring his principles even as she worried about the consequences. "Will he try to force you out?" "Probably," Zach admitted. "But I'm ready for him. This land is all I have, and I don't intend to lose it." The conviction in his voice stirred something in Deanna, a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. In Thomas, she had married a man who coveted what others had. In Zach, she was seeing a man who treasured what was his and defended it with honor. The next few weeks passed peacefully enough, though Zach took to carrying his rifle when checking the far reaches of his property. Deanna fell into the rhythms of ranch life, learning new skills and regaining confidence that Thomas had systematically destroyed. She discovered she had a knack for ranch finances, organizing Zach's haphazard accounts into a proper ledger. Rosa taught her to make tortillas and spicy stews that became regular features at the dinner table. As November deepened toward winter, Deanna realized with some surprise that she no longer thought of leaving. The ranch had become home, Rosa a dear friend, and Zach. Zach had become something she wasn't quite ready to name, though her heart quickened whenever he entered a room. They were in the barn one afternoon, Deanna helping Zach treat a minor cut on his favorite gelding's leg when he suddenly asked, "Do you miss it? Your old life?" Deanna thought for a moment. "I miss having a purpose of my own. Being Thomas's wife wasn't much of an identity." "What would you have done if you'd had the choice?" "I wanted to be a teacher," Deanna admitted. "I was good with children and I loved books. My father thought it was a waste of time for a girl who would just end up married." Zach handed her a clean rag. "Hollow Ridge could use a teacher. The schoolhouse has been closed since Miss Pemberton left last spring." The suggestion took Deanna by surprise. "Me, a teacher? Why not? You're educated, good with figures. I've seen your work with the accounts. The town council's been looking for someone." The idea took root, growing more appealing the more she considered it. Would they hire a widow with no formal teaching experience? Worth asking, Zach said with a shrug. "Sheriff Mills sits on the council. I could speak to him next time I'm in town." Deanna felt a surge of hope. Teaching would give her independence while allowing her to remain in Hollow Ridge near the ranch, near Zach. "I'd like that. Thank you." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the horse standing patiently as they cleaned and bandaged the wound. When they finished, Deanna found herself standing closer to Zach than she had realized, close enough to see the different shades of gray in his eyes, to smell the clean scent of soap and leather that seemed to cling to him. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Zach's gaze dropped to her lips and he leaned almost imperceptibly closer. Then the gelding snorted and stamped, breaking the spell. Zach stepped back, clearing his throat. "Better get him back to his stall," he said gruffly. "Storm's coming tonight." Deanna nodded, disappointed and relieved in equal measure. She wasn't sure she was ready for whatever was growing between them, no matter how her body seemed to yearn for his touch. The storm arrived shortly after sunset, bringing howling winds and the first heavy snow of the season. Deanna sat by the fire, working on a scarf she was knitting for Rosa's Christmas gift, while Zach read aloud from a dog-eared copy of The Last of the Mohicans. His deep voice blended with the crackling fire and the wind's moan, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety. Rosa had already retired for the night, leaving them alone in the comfortable living area. It had become their evening ritual reading, knitting, occasionally sharing stories of their lives before meeting. Deanna had learned about Zach's childhood in Missouri, his difficult relationship with his father, his time scouting for the army. In turn, she had shared memories of her mother, the garden they had tended together, the small joys of her life before Thomas. The wind suddenly gusted with particular ferocity, rattling the windows. Zach paused in his reading. "That's picking up. Hope the barn door is secure." Did you check it earlier? Deanna asked. I did, but with this wind. He set the book aside, rising from his chair. I'll just take a quick look. I'll come with you, Deanna offered, setting her knitting down. I can hold the lantern. Zach hesitated. It's bitter cold out there. I'll bundle up, she insisted, already reaching for her coat and scarf. There was something exciting about braving the storm together, a small adventure in their quiet evening. They wrapped up warmly, Zach lighting a sturdy lantern before they ventured into the swirling snow. The wind bit through Deanna's layers, but the exhilaration of the storm, its raw power and beauty made her laugh aloud. Zach glanced at her with a smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that made her heart flutter. The short walk to the barn was a battle against the elements, but they arrived with the lantern still lit. Inside, the animals were restless, sensing the storm's intensity. Zach moved efficiently through the stalls, checking each animal while Deanna held the light. Everything seems secure, he finally said, patting the neck of his gelding. We should head back before a tremendous crack split the night, followed by a heavy thud against the barn roof. The horses nickered nervously as dust and bits of straw rained down from the ceiling. Tree branch, Zach muttered, looking up. Big one from the sound of it. We should check the roof for damage. They climbed the ladder to the hayloft, Zach leading the way with the lantern. From there, a smaller ladder led to a trapdoor in the roof, used for ventilation in summer. Zach pushed it open cautiously, snow immediately blowing in. Stay here, he told Deanna. I'll take a quick look. But as he moved toward the opening, a gust of wind caught the trapdoor, wrenching it from his grasp. It slammed back on its hinges with such force that the rusty metal snapped, and the door was torn away completely. Snow and wind poured in through the opening. Zach backed down quickly, his face grave. We can't fix that tonight. The hay will be ruined if we leave it open. What can we do? Deanna asked, shivering as the cold air swirled around them. Zach looked around the loft, thinking quickly. We'll need to move the hay away from this area and cover the opening from the inside with that old canvas tarp. He pointed to a heavy tarpaulin folded against one wall. They worked together, shifting hay bales to clear a space beneath the opening. The wind howled through the hole, making communication difficult. As they unfurled the heavy tarp, another violent gust caught it like a sail, nearly pulling it from their grasp. Deanna lunged to catch a corner, her foot slipping on scattered hay. Time seemed to slow as she felt herself falling toward the edge of the loft. Her stomach lurched, the 15-foot drop to the hard-packed dirt below flashing before her eyes. Then Zach's strong hand caught her wrist, yanking her back from the brink. The momentum sent them both tumbling into a pile of loose hay, Deanna landing atop Zach's solid chest. For a moment, they lay frozen, the lantern flickering where it had safely landed several feet away. Deanna could feel Zach's heart hammering beneath her palms, matching the frantic pace of her own. Are you all right? He asked, his voice rough with concern. Deanna nodded, unable to find her voice. They were pressed together from chest to thigh, faces inches apart. Zach's hands rested at her waist, steadying her even as the storm raged above them. I thought. He began, then swallowed hard. I thought I'd lose you. The raw emotion in his voice broke something open inside Deanna. Without thinking, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. Zach froze for a heartbeat, then responded with a hunger that matched her own. His arms tightened around her, one hand sliding up to tangle in her hair. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and longing poured into this one perfect connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Zach looked at her with wonder. Deanna, he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. Reality came rushing back, along with a wave of uncertainty. Deanna pulled away, sitting up amid the scattered hay. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Don't, Zach interrupted, sitting up beside her. Don't apologize, not unless you regret it. Did she regret it? Deanna searched her feelings and found no regret, only fear of trusting again, of being vulnerable, of the intensity of what she felt for this man. I don't regret it, she admitted softly, but I'm afraid. Zach nodded, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. I understand fear, Deanna. I've been afraid of feeling anything since Caroline died, until you came. The honesty in his words touched her deeply. I need time, she whispered, We have time, he assured her, getting to his feet and offering his hand. Let's finish securing this roof before we freeze. They worked together to fasten the tarp over the opening, their movements more careful now, hyper-aware of each other's presence. When the job was done, they descended to the barn floor and checked the animals once more before facing the storm again. The walk back to the house was even more challenging, the wind having picked up further. Zach's arm around her waist guided Deanna through the swirling white, the warmth of his body a shield against the bitter cold. Inside, they shed their snow-covered outer clothes, shivering as warmth slowly returned to their extremities. The fire had died down in their absence, and Zach busied himself building it back up while Deanna made hot coffee. They sat before the renewed flames, mugs warming their hands, neither quite ready to discuss what had happened in the barn. Instead, Zach picked up the book again, finding their place and continuing to read as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Deanna felt it in the heightened awareness of every movement Zach made, in the way her skin seemed to tingle whenever his gaze met hers. Something had awakened between them that couldn't be put back to sleep. As the days passed, they maintained a careful distance, neither mentioning the kiss but both acutely aware of its memory. Deanna threw herself into preparations for her meeting with the Hollow Ridge Town Council about the teaching position, studying Zach's small collection of books and planning sample lessons. Rosa, sharp-eyed and wise, watched them both with knowing glances but said nothing. The storm passed, leaving behind a white landscape that glittered in the winter sun. A week later, Zach hitched the horses to the sleigh, the roads now too snow-covered for regular travel, and took Deanna into town for her meeting. "You'll do wonderfully," he assured her as they approached Hollow Ridge. "Just be yourself." The meeting took place in the back room of the general store, the only space large enough for the 5 council members to gather comfortably. Sheriff Mills was there, along with Mrs. Evans from the store, Reverend Parker from the small church, Dr. Wilson, and Mr. Henderson, the owner of the town's bank. Diana presented her qualifications and ideas for the school with more confidence than she felt. The council asked thoughtful questions about her teaching philosophy, her ability to handle children of different ages, and her plans for the curriculum. The position would start after the new year, Reverend Parker explained. "The salary is modest, I'm afraid $30 a month, with a small cabin behind the schoolhouse provided for the teacher's residence." Deanna nodded, her mind already calculating what such an arrangement would mean. Independence, her own home, a purpose beyond being someone's wife or housekeeper. And yet, the thought of leaving Zach's ranch brought an unexpected pang. "We'll need a few days to consider all candidates," Mr. Henderson said, though his approving nod suggested Deanna had made a favorable impression. Outside, Zach was waiting with the sleigh. "How did it go?" he asked as she approached. "Well, I think," Deanna replied, climbing in beside him, "they'll make their decision soon." As they rode back to the ranch, the sleigh runners gliding smoothly over the packed snow, Deanna found herself torn between hope for the teaching position and reluctance to leave what had become her sanctuary. She stole a glance at Zach's profile, strong and steady beside her, and wondered if he would miss her presence as much as she would miss his. Back at the ranch, Rosa had prepared a celebratory dinner, confident that Deanna would be offered the position. "They would be fools to choose anyone else," she declared, serving up a special apple pie for dessert. That night, Deanna couldn't sleep. The possibility of change, of starting yet another new chapter in her life, kept her mind racing. She finally rose, wrapping a shawl around her nightgown, and made her way to the kitchen for a cup of tea. She was surprised to find Zach already there, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, staring into the dying embers of the kitchen stove. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. He looked up, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Too much on my mind." Deanna prepared her tea and joined him at the table. "Care to share your thoughts?" Zach was quiet for a long moment. "I was thinking about you leaving," he finally said, "if you get the teaching position." "It's just a few miles away," Deanna pointed out. "We'd still see each other in town." "It wouldn't be the same." Zach's hands tightened around his cup. I've gotten used to having you here, Deanna. The house will feel empty without you. The simple honesty of his statement touched her deeply. I've gotten used to being here too, she admitted. More than I expected to. Then why leave? The question hung in the air between them. Deanna took a careful sip of her tea, organizing her thoughts. Because I need to know I can stand on my own. After Thomas, after everything. I need to prove to myself that I'm strong enough. Zach reached across the table, his warm hand covering hers. You're the strongest person I know, Deanna Holloway. You survived a man who tried to destroy you. You rebuilt yourself from the ashes he left behind. Taking the teaching position doesn't prove your strength, it just gives you a new way to use it. Tears pricked at Diana's eyes. No one had ever seen her so clearly, understood her so completely. Zach, a sudden noise from outside cut her off, the unmistakable sound of breaking glass, followed by an orange glow visible through the kitchen window. Fire. Zach was on his feet instantly, rushing to the window. Someone set the barn ablaze. Terror flooded Deanna's veins, memories of her last night in Thomas's house surging back in vivid detail. But this time, instead of running away from the flames, she found herself running toward them, following Zach as he burst out the back door. The barn was indeed on fire, flames licking up one side of the wooden structure. Inside, the animals were making frantic sounds of distress. Rosa appeared beside them, hastily dressed, her eyes wide with fear. The horses, Deanna cried. We have to get them out. Zach was already racing toward the barn. Rosa, get water. Deanna, there's a bucket by the well, start a chain. But as they sprang into action, riders appeared from the darkness, 3 men on horseback, faces concealed by bandanas. One held a flaming torch, which he hurled toward the house. It landed on the porch, igniting the dry wood instantly. Garrett's men, Zach shouted, changing direction to intercept the riders. Rosa, Deanna, the house. Deanna froze, paralyzed by the sight of flames climbing the porch steps. Not again, her mind screamed. Not another fire, Deanna. Rosa's urgent voice broke through her terror. Help me. Together they rushed to extinguish the fire on the porch while Zach confronted the intruders. Deanna could hear shouting, then the crack of gunfire. Her heart nearly stopped at the sound, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand, dousing the porch flames with water from the rain barrel. When the immediate threat to the house was contained, Deanna turned to see Zach grappling with one of the mounted men, trying to pull him from his horse. The other riders were circling, one drawing his pistol. Zach, look out, Deanna screamed as the man took aim. Her warning came just in time. Zach ducked, the bullet splintering wood where his head had been moments before. He managed to yank the first rider to the ground, landing a solid punch that left the man motionless in the snow. The remaining riders, seeing their companion fallen, turned their horses and fled into the night. Zach didn't pursue them, instead racing back to the barn, which was now fully engulfed in flames. The animals, Deanna cried, following him. Stay back, Zach ordered, but she ignored him, pulling her shawl over her nose and mouth against the smoke. Together, they managed to open the stalls and drive the panicked horses out into the night. The cattle in the attached pen had already broken through the fence in their terror, scattering across the snowy pasture. By the time they reached the last stall, the roof was beginning to collapse, timbers groaning ominously above them. Get out now, Zach shouted, pushing Deanna toward the door. They burst out of the barn just as a section of the roof caved in, sending a shower of embers into the night sky. Deanna stumbled to her knees in the snow, coughing violently, her eyes streaming from the smoke. Zach pulled her further from the inferno, his strong arms lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Are you hurt? He demanded, his face blackened with soot, eyes wild with fear. Deanna shook her head, unable to speak through her coughing. Behind them, the barn was beyond saving, the flames reaching high into the night sky. Rosa approached, leading Zach's gelding and Deanna's mare, the first animals they had freed. The man, Deanna finally managed, the one you knocked down. Gone, Rosa said grimly. He got up and ran while we were saving the horses. Zach's expression hardened. Garrett, this has his fingerprints all over it. What do we do now? Deanna asked, the reality of their situation sinking in. First, we secure the house and tend to the animals we saved, Zach said decisively. At first light, I'll ride to town and bring back the sheriff. Garrett's gone too far this time. Attempted murder won't go unpunished. They worked through the night, gathering the scattered livestock, ensuring the house was safe, and keeping watch for any return of the arsonists. By dawn, the barn was a smoldering ruin, but the house and most of the animals had been saved. As promised, Zach rode to Hollow Ridge at first light, leaving Deanna and Rosa with strict instructions to stay vigilant and keep his rifle handy. The hours of his absence stretched endlessly, each sound outside making Deanna jump. It was late afternoon when Zach finally returned, accompanied by Sheriff Mills and 2 deputies. The sheriff's expression was grim as he surveyed the destroyed barn. "I've got men looking for Garrett's hands," he told them. "One was seen at the doctor's this morning with burns on his arms matches your description of the man Zach fought with." "And Garrett himself?" Deanna asked. The sheriff shook his head. "Claims he was at home all night with witnesses to prove it, but if his men talk." "They won't," Zach said flatly. "Garrett pays them too well for loyalty." Sheriff Mills sighed. "You're probably right, but the attempted murder of a rancher and 2 women is beyond even what the county's been willing to overlook from Garrett. The territorial governor's been notified." It wasn't much consolation as they faced the extent of the damage in daylight. The barn would need to be completely rebuilt. Several animals were still missing, likely scattered across the countryside. The house had escaped with minor damage to the porch, but the sense of security Deanna had found there was shattered. That evening, after the sheriff and his men had gone, the 3 of them sat in subdued silence around the kitchen table. Rosa finally spoke, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Perhaps it is time to consider Mr. Garrett's offer, Senor Zach." Zach's head snapped up. "Never, I won't be bullied off my land." "He will not stop," Rosa persisted. "Next time we might not be so fortunate." Deanna watched the conflict play across Zach's face, determination warring with the practical need to protect his household. She understood his refusal to yield to intimidation, but also feared what Garrett might do next. "There must be another way," she said quietly. Zach looked at her, a question in his eyes. "What if we weren't fighting alone?" Deanna continued, an idea forming. "What if the other ranchers, Wilkins and Peterson, joined forces with you? Garrett wouldn't be able to pick you off one by one." A spark of hope lit Zach's expression. "An alliance. It could work. If we present a united front, stand together against his tactics, and involve the territorial officials," Deanna added. "Garrett may have influence in the county, but surely the governor won't tolerate this kind of lawlessness." "It's worth trying," Zach agreed, his energy returning. "I'll ride to the Wilkins and Peterson ranches tomorrow, see if they'll join us." Deanna felt a surge of pride at his resilience. This was the man she had come to admire, one who faced adversity with courage and creativity rather than surrender or blind stubbornness. That night, as Deanna prepared for bed in the room that had become hers, a soft knock at the door surprised her. She opened it to find Zach standing there, his expression serious. "May I come in for a moment?" he asked. Deanna nodded, suddenly aware of her simple nightgown and loosened hair. Zach entered but remained near the door, maintaining a respectful distance. "I need to say something," he began, his voice low and intense. "Last night when I saw the flames, when I thought you might be hurt, I realized something I've been too afraid to admit." Deanna's heart began to pound. "What's that?" "I love you, Deanna." The words were simple, direct, like the man himself. "I know it might be too soon after everything you've been through. I know you need your independence, but I couldn't face another day without telling you." Deanna felt tears well in her eyes. After Thomas, she had thought herself incapable of trusting, of loving again. Yet here she was, her heart overflowing with emotion for this honorable, steadfast man. "You don't have to say anything now," Zach continued, misinterpreting her silence. "Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know before I ride out tomorrow, life's too unpredictable not to speak the truth when you have the chance." As he turned to go, Deanna found her voice. "Zach, wait." He paused, hope and fear mingling in his eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since you found me by Sweetwater Creek." I just didn't trust myself to recognize love after so much pain. In 2 strides, Zach crossed the room, gathering her in his arms. This kiss was different from their first, not born of danger and adrenaline, but of certainty and commitment. When they finally parted, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever comes next, we face it together," he promised. "Whether that means you teaching in town or staying here, whatever you need." Deanna smiled through her tears. "Right now, I just need you." The next morning, Zach rode out early to visit the neighboring ranchers. Deanna spent the day helping Rosa clean up after the fire and taking inventory of what they'd lost. Despite the destruction, she felt a curious lightness, as if admitting her love for Zach had released a burden she hadn't known she was carrying. Zach returned at dusk, snow dusting his shoulders, but his expression triumphant. "Wilkins and Peterson are with us," he announced as he stomped the snow from his boots. "They've both suffered Garrett's intimidation tactics too. Peterson lost half his herd in a mysterious stampede last month. Wilkins found one of his wells poisoned. So what's the plan?" Deanna asked, helping him out of his coat. "We're riding into town tomorrow, all 3 of us, to meet with the sheriff and compose a formal complaint to the territorial governor. Strength in numbers." The confrontation came sooner than expected. As they prepared for dinner, the sound of approaching riders put them all on alert. Zach grabbed his rifle, positioning himself at the window. 6 riders, he reported grimly. Garrett's at the front. Deanna's stomach clenched with fear, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What do they want?" "To finish what they started, I expect." Zach checked his rifle, then turned to Deanna and Rosa. "Both of you go to the root cellar. There's a trapdoor in the floor that leads to a tunnel. My father built it as an escape route during the early Indian troubles." "I'm not leaving you," Deanna said firmly. "Nor am I," Rosa added, already retrieving the shotgun from above the fireplace. Zach looked between them, recognizing the futility of argument. "Stay away from the windows, and if shooting starts, get down immediately." The riders stopped in the yard, Garrett's voice calling out, "Flint, come out and talk." Zach moved to the door, opening it just enough to reply without exposing himself. "Say your piece from there, Garrett." "Now, is that any way to treat a neighbor?" Garrett's voice was smoothly threatening. "Especially one who's come to make you a final offer. I'm not interested in any offer that comes with torches and guns in the night," Zach called back. "That unfortunate incident was a misunderstanding," Garrett replied. "My men were overzealous. They've been disciplined accordingly." Deanna moved closer to the door, though still out of sight. She could just see Garrett through the crack, an imposing figure on a magnificent black horse, flanked by armed men. $2,000 for your water rights," Garrett continued. "More than fair, considering your diminished circumstances." "My answer is still no," Zach said steadily. "And you should know that Wilkins, Peterson, and I have submitted a formal complaint to the territorial governor about your methods of persuasion." For the first time, Garrett's composed facade cracked. "That would be unwise, Flint, very unwise indeed." "No more unwise than setting fire to a man's property with women inside," Zach replied. "The governor takes a dim view of attempted murder." Garrett's expression darkened. "You have no proof, don't we?" Deanna couldn't stay silent any longer, stepping into view beside Zach. "One of your men was treated for burns. Another left his bandana behind when he fled, and I can identify all 3 of them." It was a bluff. She hadn't seen their faces clearly in the darkness, but Garrett didn't know that. His gaze fixed on her with cold calculation. "Mrs. Holloway, still playing house with Flint, I see. Did he tell you he's as good as bankrupt? That barn was uninsured, I'd wager. Without it, he'll lose half his stock to the winter weather." "I know everything I need to know about Zach," Deanna replied calmly, "including that he's an honorable man who can't be bought or frightened away." Garrett's smile was reptilian. "Everyone has a price, Mrs. Holloway, or a breaking point." His gaze shifted back to Zach. "My offer stands until noon tomorrow. After that." He shrugged eloquently. "Well, winter's a dangerous time. Accidents happen." With that, he wheeled his horse around, leading his men back the way they had come. Deanna released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He's desperate," Zach observed, closing and bolting the door. "The governor's involvement has him worried." "He's also dangerous," Rosa said grimly. more so now that he's cornered. They spent an uneasy night, taking turns keeping watch. Deanna insisted on taking her shift, refusing to be treated as someone who needed protection rather than a partner in their struggle. As she sat by the window in the pre-dawn hours, rifle across her lap, she reflected on how far she had come from the terrified woman who had fled through the night just 2 months earlier. Thomas had nearly destroyed her, but he had failed. From those ashes, she had built something new: confidence, purpose, and a capacity for love she had thought forever extinguished. Zach found her there as the first light of dawn crept across the snow-covered landscape. He sat beside her, his warm hand covering hers. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly. Deanna smiled. "I was thinking about fires." Zach raised an eyebrow. "Not the most cheerful subject. No, but important." She turned to face him. "Fire destroyed my old life, but it led me here to you. Then fire threatened this new beginning, but instead of breaking us, it made us stronger." Understanding dawned in Zach's eyes, like steel forged in flames. "Exactly." Deanna squeezed his hand. "Garrett thinks he can break us with threats and destruction. He doesn't understand that some things become stronger in fire." Zach leaned forward, brushing a tender kiss across her lips. "When did you get so wise, Deanna Holloway?" "I had a good teacher," she replied with a smile. "A certain stubborn rancher who showed me what real strength looks like." After breakfast, they prepared to ride into town for their meeting with the sheriff. The plan was to gather with Wilkins and Peterson at the sheriff's office, present their united front, and formalize their complaint against Garrett. As they were saddling the horses, a rider approached at a gallop one of Sheriff Mills's deputies. He reined in hard, his horse blowing steam in the cold air. "Flint, sheriff sent me to warn you. Garrett's gathered a dozen men. They're planning something big." "Sheriff's trying to organize a posse, but he's short-handed." Zach's face hardened. "When?" "Today. Soon, from what our informant said." The deputy looked nervously over his shoulder. "I need to warn Peterson and Wilkins too." "Go," Zach urged. "We'll be ready here." After the deputy galloped off, Deanna turned to Zach. "What now?" "We prepare," he said grimly. "Rosa, get everything valuable down to the root cellar. Deanna, help me barricade the windows. If Garrett wants a fight, we'll give him one he won't forget." They worked quickly, transforming the ranch house into a makeshift fortress. Furniture was pushed against doors and windows, leaving only narrow gaps for rifles. Water buckets were positioned throughout the house in case of fire. Ammunition was distributed and checked. "I should ride for more help," Rosa suggested as they finished their preparations. Zach shook his head. "Too dangerous. Garrett's men are likely watching the roads." "Then we stand together," Deanna said, checking the revolver Zach had given her. The weight of it was unfamiliar in her hands, but she was determined to defend their home. They didn't have to wait long. Just before noon, a cloud of dust on the horizon announced the approach of riders, many more than the 6 who had come the previous day. "At least 15, Zach muttered, counting through his field glasses. "Garrett's pulled out all the stops." Deanna felt fear flutter in her stomach, but she pushed it down. "What's the plan?" "Hold them off as long as we can," Zach replied. "The sheriff will come with help once he's gathered enough men. We just need to last until then." The riders stopped just out of rifle range. Garrett rode forward alone, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. "Flint," he called. "Last chance. Sign over your water rights and we'll ride away peaceful-like. Refuse and I can't be responsible for what happens." Zach moved to the window. "You've overplayed your hand, Garrett. The sheriff knows what you're planning. A posse is on the way." Garrett's laugh carried across the open space. "The sheriff's busy with a disturbance in town one my men arranged. No one's coming to save you, Flint. Sign the papers, or we burn what's left of your ranch to the ground." Deanna's blood ran cold at the mention of fire, but Zach's steady presence beside her kept panic at bay. "He's bluffing about the sheriff," she whispered. "He has to be." "Maybe," Zach agreed, "but we can't count on help arriving in time." He turned to face her fully, his eyes intense. "Deanna, if things go badly, you and Rosa take the tunnel from the root cellar. It comes out by the creek. Get to the Peterson place, it's closest." "I'm not leaving you," Deanna insisted. "I need to know you're safe," Zach said urgently. "Please, Deanna, promise me." Before she could answer, Garrett's patience evidently ran out. "Fire the warning shots," he ordered. Gunfire erupted, bullets thudding into the walls of the ranch house. Zach pulled Deanna down below the window, shielding her with his body. Rosa had already taken position at another window, her shotgun ready. "That was just to get your attention, Flint," Garrett shouted when the firing stopped. "Next time we aim to hit," Zach's jaw set in a hard line. "Rosa, watch the back. They'll try to surround us." He positioned himself at the front window, rifle trained on Garrett's men. "Deanna, keep loading for me." The standoff continued for nearly an hour. Occasional shots were exchanged, but Garrett seemed reluctant to order a full assault, perhaps hoping Zach would surrender without further bloodshed. For their part, they conserved ammunition, firing only when they had clear targets. Then, in a heart-stopping moment, Deanna spotted movement at the edge of the property, men creeping toward the house with what looked like oil cans. "Zach," she cried, "they're going to try to burn us out." Zach swore under his breath. "I can't get a clear shot from here." "Rosa." But Rosa was engaged with men approaching from the back, the boom of her shotgun punctuating her colorful Spanish curses. Deanna made a split-second decision. There was a small window in the kitchen that overlooked the side yard where the men were approaching. Without hesitation, she grabbed her revolver and moved swiftly through the house. "Deanna, no," Zach called after her, but she was already at the kitchen window, taking careful aim as Zach had taught her during target practice. Her first shot went wide, but it was enough to startle the men with the oil cans. They scattered, seeking cover. Her second shot hit one of the cans, spilling its contents harmlessly onto the snow. Zach appeared beside her, pride and exasperation mingling in his expression. "Good shooting, but stay low." A bullet shattered the window glass above them, showering them with fragments. Zach pulled Deanna to the floor, covering her again with his body. The gesture was so instinctively protective that Deanna felt a surge of love amid the danger. "We can't hold them off forever," she said, reality setting in. "There are too many," Zach nodded grimly. "If they try to burn us out." He didn't need to finish. They both knew what fire could do. A sudden commotion outside drew their attention. New voices were shouting, and the gunfire took on a different pattern. Zach risked a glance out the broken window. "I don't believe it," he breathed. "Peterson and Wilkins, they've brought their men." Deanna peered cautiously over the windowsill. Sure enough, riders were pouring into the ranch yard from the east, at least a dozen men, with Peterson and Wilkins at their head. They had caught Garrett's forces from behind, throwing them into confusion. The sheriff's deputy must have reached them in time, Deanna realized. The tide of battle turned quickly. Caught between defenders in the house and the newcomers at their backs, Garrett's men began to retreat. Garrett himself was shouting orders, trying to rally his forces, but it was clear the surprise attack had broken their resolve. As suddenly as it had begun, the shooting stopped. In the ringing silence that followed, they could hear Peterson's voice calling out, "It's over, Garrett. Sheriff's on his way with the territorial marshal. Throw down your weapons." From their vantage point, they could see Garrett's face contort with fury and disbelief. For a moment, it seemed he might order his remaining men to continue the fight. Then, with a visible effort, he regained his composure. "This isn't finished, Flint," he shouted toward the house. "Not by a long shot." With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped away, several of his men following. Others, seeing their leader flee, surrendered to Peterson's and Wilkins's men. Zach and Deanna emerged cautiously from the house, scarcely believing the danger had passed so quickly. Peterson rode up to meet them, his weathered face split by a wide grin. "Thought you could use some neighbors, Flint," he called, dismounting. "Sheriff's about 15 minutes behind us with the marshal and a proper posse." Zach grasped the older man's hand warmly. "I owe you, Peterson." "You too, Wilkins," he added as the second rancher joined them. "You owe us nothing," Wilkins replied. "We should have stood together against Garrett long ago. Maybe then good men like Johnson and McCarthy wouldn't have lost their land." Rosa emerged from the house, shotgun still in hand but a smile breaking through her usual stern expression. "I will make coffee for our heroes," she announced, "and the good whiskey for those who want it." As the men secured the captured gunmen and tended to minor injuries, Deanna found herself standing beside Zach, surveying the aftermath of the battle. The ranch house had taken damage, broken windows, bullet-riddled walls, the porch railing splintered, but it stood. They stood. Zach's arm slipped around her waist, pulling her close against his side. "All right," he asked softly. Diana nodded, leaning into his strength. "We did it." "We did," he agreed. "Together." The word carried a promise that made Diana's heart swell. Together they had faced fire and bullets. Together they had defended their home. Together they would rebuild what had been damaged. Sheriff Mills arrived with the territorial marshal, a stern-faced man named Dawson, who wasted no time taking charge of the prisoners and recording statements from everyone involved. When Diana described the previous night's visit from Garrett and his explicit threats, the marshal's expression darkened. "We've been building a case against Garrett for months," he explained. "His influence with the county judge has protected him so far, but attempted murder and these organized attacks are beyond what even his friends in high places can overlook." "Will you catch him?" Diana asked. Marshal Dawson nodded grimly. "Count on it, madam. He won't get far." As the day wore on, neighbors from surrounding ranches arrived, bringing food and offers of help with repairs. Diana found herself moved nearly to tears by the community's response. After years of isolation with Thomas, the warmth of these connections felt like a miracle. By nightfall, the marshal had departed with his prisoners, promising to send telegrams to all nearby settlements with descriptions of Garrett and his remaining men. Temporary repairs had been made to the windows and doors, and plans laid for rebuilding the barn once weather permitted. The house was finally quiet, the last of the neighbors having departed with promises to return the next day. Rosa had retired to her room, exhaustion evident in the droop of her normally straight shoulders. Diana found Zach on the porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. The cold was bitter, but after the heat of battle and the crowded house, it felt refreshing. "You should be resting," Zach said as she joined him, though he immediately opened his coat, wrapping it and his arm around her to share warmth. "So should you," she countered, nestling against him. "It's been a day neither of us is likely to forget." Zach chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her side. "That's putting it mildly." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the occasional creak of the damaged porch beneath their feet. "I've been thinking," Diana finally said, "about the teaching position." Zach tensed slightly beside her. "And I think I'll accept if they offer it," she said slowly, "but I won't be living in the teacher's cabin." Zach turned to face her fully, confusion evident in his expression. "Where will you live then?" Diana smiled up at him, heart full of certainty. "Here, with my husband, if he'll have me." For a moment, Zach seemed unable to process her words, then joy broke across his face like sunrise. "Diana Holloway, are you proposing to me?" "I believe I am," she replied, laughing at his astonishment. "Unless you'd rather do the asking." Instead of answering, Zach swept her into his arms, kissing her with all the pent-up emotion of the day. Relief, joy, and love intermingled until Diana felt dizzy with happiness. "Is that a yes?" she murmured when they finally broke apart. "That's the most definite yes I've ever given," Zach assured her, his eyes bright with emotion. "But are you sure, after everything with Thomas?" Diana placed her hand against his cheek, feeling the strength and gentleness that defined him. "I'm sure. You showed me that love doesn't have to burn and destroy. With you, I found warmth instead of fire, protection instead of pain." She smiled up at the man who had saved her in more ways than he knew. "You wouldn't let me burn, Zach, not ever." Zach covered her hand with his own. "I'll spend every day making sure of that," he promised. A week later, the territorial marshal returned with news. Stuart Garrett had been captured trying to cross into Colorado territory. With testimony from his captured men, who had turned on their employer in exchange for leniency, Garrett faced charges that would keep him imprisoned for many years. 2 weeks after that, Diana received word that the town council had unanimously selected her as Hollow Ridge's new teacher to start after the new year. The same day, Peterson and Wilkins arrived with their hands and enough lumber to begin rebuilding Zach's barn, a wedding present they insisted couldn't wait for spring. On the first Sunday in December, Diana stood beside Zach in Hollow Ridge's small church, Rosa beaming from the front pew as they exchanged vows. Deanna wore a simple blue dress that matched the winter sky, her golden hair crowned with a wreath of evergreen sprigs and dried berries. "I take you, Deanna Holloway, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Zach's deep voice carried through the hushed church. "To have and to hold, to honor and protect, to love and to cherish, as long as we both shall live." When Deanna repeated her vows, her voice was clear and confident. This marriage wasn't an arrangement or a trap, it was a choice, freely made, born of love and respect. As Reverend Parker pronounced them husband and wife, she felt the final shadows of her past fade away, replaced by the bright promise of a future with the man who had taught her to trust again. The celebration afterward at the ranch was lively, with music from Peterson's fiddle and plenty of rosas cooking to go around. As Deanna moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, she caught Zach watching her from across the room, his gray eyes warm with adoration. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Rosa had tactfully retired early, Deanna found herself alone with her husband for the first time. Any nervousness she might have felt was banished by Zach's gentle patience and obvious devotion. In his arms, she discovered joy where once there had been only duty and pain. Spring arrived, bringing new life to the ranch. The rebuilt barn stood stronger than before, housing not only Zach's original stock, but new additions purchased with the settlement money the court had ordered Garrett to pay. Deanna balanced her teaching duties with her role as Zach's wife and partner, finding fulfillment in both. One warm evening in May, they sat on the repaired porch, watching the sunset paint the new barn in shades of gold and crimson. Deanna rested her head on Zach's shoulder, his arm secure around her waist. "I have something to tell you," she said, a smile playing at her lips. Zach turned to her, curiosity in his eyes. "What's that, Mrs. Flint?" The name still gave her a thrill every time she heard it. "The school term ends in 3 weeks," she said. "I've informed the council I'll need a substitute for the fall term." Zach's brow furrowed in confusion. "Are you not enjoying teaching?" "I love teaching," Deanna assured him. "But our child is due in November, and I thought I might want some time at home with him. Or her." For the second time in their relationship, she had the pleasure of seeing Zachariah Flint completely speechless. Then, with a whoop of joy that likely startled the cattle in the distant pasture, he lifted her from her chair and spun her in a circle, her laughter joining his in the golden evening air. "A baby," he marveled when he finally set her down, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Deanna covered his hands with her own. "Our family," she corrected softly. "Our future." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land they had defended together, Deanna thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fire Thomas had set had been meant to destroy her, but instead it had forged a path to true happiness to a man who would never let her burn, who would only ever warm her with the steady flame of his love. And that flame, she knew with absolute certainty, would never go out.